Hello, my friend. It is wonderful to have you here today. Have you ever stood in a kitchen and held a long, smooth, deep purple fruit in your hand? Heavy, cool to the touch, shining like polished stone. You slice it open. The white flesh inside is soft and full of small seeds. The smell is gentle, almost sweet. And then you remember its name. Eggplant. Think about that for a moment. This dark purple fruit, long and curved like a teardrop. We call it an egg. Why? There are over 4 million acres of eggplant grown around the world today. China grows the most. India is right behind. Together, they make 85% of all the eggplants on Earth. It lives in Italian pasta and Greek moussaka, in Indian curry and Turkish stuffed dishes, in Chinese stir-fries, Japanese pickles, and Lebanese baba ganoush. But here is the strange part, my friends. For most of its long history, people were afraid of it. They called it the mad apple. They believed it could make you lose your mind. Doctors warned against it. Some kings banned it. And yet, here it sits in our kitchens today, stuffed, roasted, loved. So tonight, let us go back in time together, back to a small, bitter, spiny fruit that nobody wanted to eat, back to a wedding that changed everything, back to a long journey across deserts and seas. This is the wild history of the eggplant. Our story begins in a place where green forests meet wide rivers, the land between northeast India and southern China, a warm, wet land, full of birds and elephants, full of life. Long before kings and empires, simple people lived here. They were called the Munda people. Some of their children still live there today in small villages. They are very ancient. The Munda people walked through these forests every day. They looked for food, roots, berries, leaves, anything that could feed their children. And there, in the wild grass, they found a small plant. It had pretty purple flowers. It had sharp thorns on its stem. And it grew small, round fruits, yellow, spiny, hard. Imagine picking one of those fruits. It would prick your fingers. You would have to be careful. The first taste was terrible, bitter, so bitter you wanted to spit it out. But the Munda people watched. They learned. They saw which animals ate the fruit. They saw what happened, and slowly they understood. This little fruit was not poison, it was just bitter. So they began to grow it near their homes, year after year, choosing the seeds from the best fruits, the bigger ones, the less bitter ones, the ones with fewer thorns. Each generation passed the slightly better seed to the next. None of them ever tasted the eggplant we know today. They were working for grandchildren they would never meet. I find this hard to picture, even now. 1,000 grandmothers, none of them ever saw the finished fruit. Each one only saw the next, slightly less bitter version, and kept going anyway. In old Sanskrit books, we find the first written records. These books are called the Charaka and Sushruta Samhitas. They are very old, from more than 2,000 years ago. They describe the eggplant as medicine. Doctors used it to help people sleep, to calm the stomach, to treat pain. The Sanskrit name for eggplant was Vatigagama. Some say it means the plant that cures the wind. The wind in old Indian medicine meant pain inside the body. So the eggplant was healing food, a gift from the earth. It also had other beautiful names. Shakasreshta, which meant the excellent vegetable. Rajakushmand, which meant the royal melon. Nilphala, which meant the blue fruit. Can you imagine that? A vegetable so loved that people gave it royal names. the same vegetable we now slice up without a second thought. But India was not alone in this slow work. Far to the east, in another great civilization, the same wild fruit was being tamed at the same time. By the time of the Han Dynasty, more than 2,000 years ago, Chinese farmers were planting eggplant in their gardens. A poet named Yang Sheng wrote about it in a famous poem. He called it one of the proper vegetables of the South. So, in two great civilizations, far apart, the same fruit was finding a home. India and China, both taming the wild plant, both making it sweeter, both making it bigger, both making it part of their daily meals. For hundreds of years, the story was quiet. Eggplants grew in gardens, people cooked them in simple ways, boiled, fried in oil, mixed with spices. It was a humble food, nothing famous about it. But then, something changed. The story moved west. And here is where it gets very interesting. In the 7th and 8th centuries, the Arab world was rising. Traders moved across deserts on camels, ships sailed from port to port. Ideas, books, and food traveled with them. The eggplant traveled too. Persian merchants carried it from India into their lands. They called it badingan. They learned to grow it in the gardens of Baghdad and Damascus. They wrote about it in cookbooks. And then, the eggplant got its big moment. The year was around 825. The place was Baghdad, the most powerful and beautiful city in the world at that time. The caliph was a man named Al-Mamun. The caliph was the ruler, the most powerful man in the empire, and he was about to marry a woman named Buran. This was no ordinary wedding, my friend. The wedding of Buran lasted for more than a month. There were rivers of perfume, mountains of food, pearls thrown like rice. People still talked about that wedding hundreds of years later. And on the tables of Buran's wedding, the cooks served eggplant, stuffed, fried, with yogurt, with meat, with spices. Something happened that night. The guests loved it. They could not stop talking about it. The eggplants of Buran, the dishes of Buran. For centuries afterward, dishes made with eggplant were called buraniya. From Spain in the west, all the way back to India in the east, people named them after that royal bride. And during this time, cooks learned a small but important secret. The wild eggplant was still a little bitter, so they cut it. They sprinkled salt on the open flesh, and they waited. Out came the bitter water, drop by drop. The eggplant became sweet, soft, ready to soak up oil and spice. Salt and patience. That was the key. After centuries of fear and complaint, the eggplant was finally tamed for the table. But the journey was only beginning. In a few minutes, you will hear about a Turkish Imam who fainted at his own dinner table, and about an English doctor who warned his country never to touch this purple fruit. The eggplant still had enemies to make. First, a word about a name. Because as the eggplant traveled, its name traveled too. In Sanskrit, it was Vatigagama. The Persians shortened it to Badingan. The Arabs added their article and made it Al-Badinjan. The Catalans of Spain heard this and said Aubergine. The French heard the Catalans and said Aubergine. That is why today, in England, people still call it aubergine. The same word, after a journey of thousands of miles, across many languages, across more than 1,000 years. Meanwhile, the Portuguese sailed to India. They heard the word too. They turned it into berinjela. They brought this word back to India, and the people there, mixing it with their own languages, made the word brinjal. To this day in India, people say brinjal. One small fruit, many names, all born from the same ancient root. And then the eggplant met Europe. And Europe did not like what it saw. When the eggplant reached Italy, the people there looked at it with worry. The fruit was strange, dark, heavy, glossy like a wet stone, and it belonged to a dangerous family of plants, the nightshade family. In this family there were terrible names: belladonna, mandrake, henbane. These were poison plants, plants that could kill you, plants that witches were said to use in their magic. The Italian word for eggplant was melanzana, but it sounded a lot like another phrase, mala insana, the mad apple. And so the legend was born. Eat the eggplant, and you would lose your mind. Eat the eggplant, and you would fall sick with fever. Some even said you would never marry, you would never have children. You would die alone in madness. Doctors warned against it. Cookbooks left it out. Churchgoers crossed themselves when they walked past it in the market. In England, in 1597, a famous doctor named John Gerard wrote about the eggplant. He said it was full of trouble. He told English people to please stay with their own good food, not to eat this strange fruit from far lands. He believed it had a mischievous quality. For 200 years, in much of Europe, the eggplant grew only in gardens of curiosity. Rich people kept it as a pretty plant. They liked the white round fruits and the soft purple flowers, but they did not eat them. They were afraid. But people loved it too much in other places. In Italy, in Greece, in Turkey, in Spain, the eggplant kept being cooked, quietly, in poor kitchens, in village homes. Slowly, very slowly, Europe came around. The mad apple was just a fruit, a delicious fruit. We have not yet talked about the name eggplant itself, the word we use in English. Where did it come from? In the 18th century, the British were ruling parts of India. English gardeners walked through Indian markets and gardens. They saw a small variety of the fruit, not the long purple kind, but a small, round, white kind, pale and smooth. It looked exactly like a hen's egg, hanging from the plant, like little eggs growing on a bush. In 1767, an English gardener named John Abercrombie wrote a book. He called this plant the eggplant. It was the first time the word was written down in English. Other British gardeners loved this name. They grew the plant in shows and competitions. The pretty white fruits looked like real eggs. People came to see them. They thought they were beautiful and strange. Later, when the long purple kind became more popular, the word stayed. So today in America, in Australia, in many places, we still say eggplant. Even though most eggplants we see are not white, even though they look nothing like eggs. It is a small word from a small moment in history, but it stuck, and now we cannot let it go. Now let us travel to Turkey, to the time of the Ottoman Empire, to one of the most loved stories about eggplant in the whole world. There was once an Imam, a religious leader, in a small Turkish town. He married a beautiful young woman. Her father was a merchant of olive oil, the richest, finest olive oil in the land. For her wedding gift, the bride received 12 large jars of this golden oil. There was olive oil, there was fire, and there was a young wife who knew exactly what to do with both. On her first night as a wife, she made her husband a dish. She took eggplants, she slit them open, she filled them with onions, garlic, tomatoes, and herbs, and then she poured olive oil over everything. So much olive oil. The whole house smelled like a heavenly garden. The Imam took one bite. His eyes closed. He sighed. The taste was beyond words. For 12 nights she made him this dish, each night using one full jar of olive oil. Each night the Imam ate with joy. But on the 13th night, when the Imam came home, the table was empty. There was no eggplant dish, no smell of olive oil. He looked at his wife. "Where is my favorite meal?" he asked. "My love," she said gently. "The olive oil is finished. There are no more jars." The Imam stood very still. And then, the story says, he fainted. To this day, this dish is called Imam Bayildi. It means the Imam fainted. You can find it on tables across Turkey, across Greece, across the whole region that was once the Ottoman Empire. The name is funny, the story is sweet, but under it lies something true. The eggplant, when treated well, can stop you in your tracks. It can take your breath away. Today, if you walked through any kitchen on earth, you would find a piece of this story. In Lebanon, people roast eggplant over fire and mash it with sesame paste. They call it baba ganoush. The smoky smell fills the room. It tastes like ancient sun and wood smoke. In Italy, they layer slices of fried eggplant with cheese and tomato sauce, then bake it until it bubbles. This is parmigiana. In China, cooks chop it into thick pieces and cook it with garlic, soy sauce, and chili. The eggplant soaks up the flavors. It melts in your mouth. In India, eggplant becomes baingan bharta. Roasted on an open flame, mashed with onions and spices, eaten warm with bread. In Greece, it becomes the heart of moussaka. Layers of soft eggplant, meat, and white sauce. In Japan, small, slim eggplants are pickled in salt, grilled over coals, or simmered in sweet soy. One fruit, so many homes, so many flavors. Each kitchen treats it a little differently, but everyone says yes to the eggplant. Think about that. This little wild plant, with its sharp thorns, its bitter yellow fruit, its dangerous family of poison cousins. This plant that humans had to slowly tame for thousands of years. This plant that whole nations once feared. It now feeds billions of people every day. We have come a long way tonight, my friend. We started in the green forests of ancient India, with small bitter fruits and the patient hands of the Munda people. We traveled to the gardens of China, to the Sanskrit doctors, to the wedding of Buran in golden Baghdad. We crossed deserts on camels. We sailed seas with Arab traders. We watched the eggplant become aubergine, brinjal, melanzana. We saw it feared as the mad apple. We saw it loved by an Ottoman imam who fainted with joy. The story of the eggplant is not just about a vegetable. It is about something much deeper. It is about patience. Think about this. To make the wild eggplant edible, our ancestors needed thousands of years, generation after generation, saving seeds, choosing fruits, cooking, tasting, trying again. They never finished. They never saw the end. Each grandparent passed the work to the grandchild. There is something about this fruit that stays with me. The wild version was almost inedible. Sharp, bitter, small. And yet our ancestors looked at it and saw food. Not today's food, not even their food. Food for someone 2,000 years ahead. This is the wisdom of the eggplant. Bitterness is not the end. It is just one step. With patience, with the right care, it becomes something good. Something that can make a hungry man cry with joy. And you, my friend, perhaps you are carrying something bitter right now. A worry, a wound, a long, quiet pain, something in your life that feels too sharp to swallow. Remember the eggplant. The wild fruit was bitter and small, but it did not stay that way. It needed time. It needed gentle hands. It needed a little salt and a little patience, and someone who believed it could become something more. Maybe you are like the eggplant. Maybe you are still in the salting stage, the waiting, the bitter water leaving you, drop by drop. It is not pleasant, but it is not the end of the story. Sometimes the most beautiful things in our lives are the things we had to wait the longest for. Today, when you walk past a basket of eggplants in the market, take a moment. Pick one up. Feel its weight. Run your fingers over its smooth, dark skin. You are holding a small piece of human history. Thousands of years of work, of hope, of stubborn belief that this strange fruit could be food. You are holding the wedding of Buran, the fainting of the Imam, the patience of the Munda people, the journey of one small word across many languages and many lives. It is all there, in your hand. The eggplant reminds us of what humans do best. We do not give up on bitter things. We salt them. We wait. We turn them, slowly, into something a hungry man would faint for. Because the story of the eggplant is the story of bitter things made sweet. By time. By care. By hands that did not give up. Thank you for joining me tonight, my friends. I hope this small purple fruit will look a little different to you now. I hope it will feel a little warmer in your hand. Leave a comment if you wish. Which part of this story surprised you most? Was it Buran's wedding? The mad apple? The Imam who fainted at his own table? And next time, my friend, we will pick up another ordinary thing. Something so common we touch it every day without thinking. But behind it lies a war, a queen, and a journey across an ocean. Its story is waiting for us.